It says, now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen. As he said, come see the place where he is. Come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I've told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, greetings. And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. While they were going, behold, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priest all that had taken place. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken, taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said, tell people, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were sleeping, or while we were asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this story has been spread among the Jews to this day. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain, to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age. That last few verses are probably pretty common. You've heard me reference them several times, as well as probably throughout your life. You've heard other ministers reference them as well. One of the last statements that Christ made while on earth, not necessarily the last one, but one of the last that he made anyway. But we see this time of going, and of course Matthew 28 covers actually several weeks of time. It's not a one-day event that we see here. This is actually several weeks as Christ appears to the disciples at different times. But the focus is kind of upon, obviously, the resurrection. And then we have this conversation that the Jewish leaders have with the people that were the guards, and then we have Christ's instruction at the end. So let's use our questions and kind of walk through, and then we'll come back and kind of sum it up at the end as well. So question one, is it a surprise that the women did not believe in his resurrection? Had he ever told them that this would happen? So first off, is it a surprise that the women did not believe in his resurrection? There was, just for a little bit of fun, there was actually someone, I think it was Dodie Reed, that posted on Facebook last week maybe, and said something to the effect of, if a woman is silent and a man talks, does she ever listen? And he set himself up for a lot of comments on that, but and he meant it as a joke. But that was not what we're talking about here. Christ had actually told them that this would happen at least 3 different times that we have record of. And if you go back into Matthew 26 was one of them, which can't necessarily always go by time, but that was prior to his arrest. He had told them what was going to happen. Now, they struggled with believing what was going to happen. Is it a surprise to us that the women did not believe in his resurrection?
I'm afraid to answer.
You're afraid to answer?
Yeah,
Let me say this. The guys, the apostles, did they believe in his resurrection? No. Okay, so what's that?
I said he told them plenty, so.
He did, right? So
The ones that was with him when he brought Lazarus out,
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine them not being able to believe. Because Lazarus been dead for, what, 3 or 4 days?
Mm-hmm. Do you think we would have believed?
See, that's what I find hard to comprehend is that these guys was with him and they saw all these miracles happen, but yet they still had, that's what we was
Yeah.
talking about in class. They still had their doubts. They still, turned against him, basically, some of them did,
Do people have, I'm sorry?
Crucified and buried. They went back to their normal lives.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. They thought it was over. Do people today still have a hard time believing? Do we have more, if you want to call it evidence or proof, today than they did? Like we talk about them actually seeing this stuff, but do we have more truth today that we can look at than what they did? Obviously, we're not seeing it face to face necessarily, but we have it recorded for us, right? And then don't we still see God work today?
Yes.
But yet we still struggle sometimes to believe, right? So it's probably not, if we get really honest and we think about it, it's probably not hard for us to imagine that they struggled to believe in the resurrection, because that's not what's supposed to happen. Now, granted, he told them it was going to happen, but when we think in human terms, like when someone dies, that's pretty well it, right? We don't expect anything to happen after that. But in this case, it did. Now, they had seen, someone brought up Lazarus. They had seen Lazarus. Now, the other thing that happened that we don't talk about too much, but that is when he actually died, there were graves that split open and there were dead people that came out and walked among the streets. We don't talk about that a lot. I actually tried to get Lynn to talk about it. He was in class with me, and he wouldn't do it because he don't know what to say about it either, I guess. But we don't talk about it much because we don't really know what or how to explain it very well. We don't know what happened to them, because the question always comes up, well, did they die again? Did they ascend? And we don't know, because the Bible doesn't tell us. And it's not necessary for us to know that either. But so they had saw some things maybe, but there was a lot going on in that moment in time. And they know that what they've always seen is that when someone dies, that's the end. And so they do, as Joe said, they went back to their life before.
The rich man and the poor guy sitting at the gate,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, well, send them back and let them tell my brothers, and so they don't believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he said they have Moses and the prophets. If they don't believe them, they won't believe.
And we got the Bible.
We got more than Moses and the prophets now, and yet we still struggle to believe. But I would venture to say that we have as much evidence as they did, even though those things happen. We have it recorded for us. It's just a matter of, do we want to believe it or do we not? Do we buy into it, but do we believe in it or do we not believe in it? But there's still people today that struggle with this very concept of, do I believe in the resurrection or not? And
That's Satan there. That's the devil doing that.
well, it's the fallen nature of man. Once we fell and we have that fallen nature within us, because of the fall within us, we have this desire to question everything of whether it's truth or not. God spoke truth to them, told them, stay away from this one tree. Everything else you can take. Satan comes, and what does he do? He starts trying to place doubt in their mind, right? So from that point forward, doubt has been in the mind of, can we trust God? Now we know, once we become a believer and we see and we experience, or we have the Holy Spirit within us, we know we can trust God, right? We still struggle sometimes acting that out, but we do know we can trust it. So it's been, since the fall, that has plagued us as humans, is this doubt that we have in our mind. And I'm talking about before salvation. That is what I'm talking about. But, probably should not be a surprise to us that the women didn't really believe it. I mean, emotionally, they were just like all the other apostles. They were on a roller coaster ride. You go back to the been 7 days prior, and he comes walking in his triumphal entry. He doesn't walk in; he rides in on the donkey, and everybody is praising him and glorifying him. And they're thinking in their mind, the earthly kingdom's about to happen, because that's what they were looking for. And then it all crumbles, in a matter of 3-4 days. And so they find themselves now where there's like this another shot of hope, but can they believe in it? Because their hope was just destroyed a few days ago, and now can I believe in this hope again? And
Same thing, they was holding on to the hope that he was gonna set up his kingdom, be king of Israel.
right, and they would get out from under the Roman oppression. That wouldn't be, they wouldn't be subjected to them anymore. So that was their mindset, is this is going to happen, and then it's all destroyed, at that point.
You can hang on to the truths of the Bible. For example, there's one that you're not gonna get by with. It's appointed unto man to die. And I don't know anybody that's beat that one. So,
Well,
when you
there's
think about stuff like that,
yeah. Now there is two that beat it.
well, yeah,
Modern day, there's nobody.
New Testament.
Yeah.
I didn't see them, but I've seen a lot of people.
Yeah. I don't think it should be a shock to us that it was a surprise to them, because I think we would be the same way. If we lived through that week, we would probably be the same way. We would like to think that we wouldn't. We would like to think that we would remember exactly what Christ said, but think about as we go through life today and something happens, and don't we sometimes have to be reminded of what Christ has promised us? And so when we think about that, we're probably not much different than what they were.
With the death of somebody you care, you're not really, your mind is not right.
Right. That's right. And, we think about it. It was 3 days, but those 3 days measured by Jewish days. So Friday to Sunday, they really didn't have a lot of time, in between to think about this. So look at question 2. What did the women believe in that the world still believes today? We've kind of talked all around this. Don hit it on it just a second ago.
That once you're dead, you're dead.
Death occurs, right? I mean, they believed in death. They believed that was the end, at least earthly life end. We still believe in that today, don't we? That when we die, I mean, none of us have the expectation that someone is fixing to rise back from the dead. We do have the expectation that Christ is going to return at some point in time. And at that point, we don't know what happens. I mean, no one can tell you exactly what's going to occur from that point. Are we going to see graves split open and souls and bodies be reunited? We don't know, but we may. But we know Christ is going to return. We also know, as Don said a minute ago, that we face death. And we also know after that is judgment, but we know from this earthly standpoint, we face death. The women knew that as well. And so in their mind, as they go to this tomb, death has occurred. It was the end. And again, they had to be reminded of what Christ had told them before, just the same as we have to be reminded sometimes.
They actually witnessed the crucifixion.
They did, yeah. They saw it with their own eyes.
They knew he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
The world in whole right now believes that the earth's on a short cycle as far as being something happened catastrophic.
Right.
The Bible teaches that something's going to happen. But I don't know why they can't tie the two together.
Well, we've talked about Christ's return. Even the apostles talked about Christ's return. And we've been talking about it now for 2,000 years. And so some people look at that and say, well, you've been talking about it for that long. Well, we've been talking about it. We know it's going to happen. We just don't know when. And thankfully, and this is what we have to communicate, thankfully God has tarried, because it's given more opportunity for people to repent and to accept him as Savior. So, his patience has actually yielded a benefit for all of us, that we've had that opportunity to share with other people and them hopefully to believe in him. But you're right. I mean, you've got the end of the world people that are not necessarily Christian. They're saying that, the world's not going to make it if we don't change some things. Well, the world's not going to make it anyway. We just don't know when. Question 3 then, was the stone rolled away so that Jesus could come out?
The stone was rolled away.
Right.
God brought him forth from the grave. And he could have all of a sudden appeared outside the tomb. He could all of a sudden appear in heaven with his Father, where whatever God chose. But I believe the stone was rolled away so witnesses could see he's not there.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't for Christ's benefit to be able to come out.
Did he come out that way?
We technically don't know. The thought is that he was probably already out of the tomb before. This whole conversation about how he led captivity captive, which speaks of what he done from the time of his death on the cross till the time of his resurrection, what he done at that point in time. And there's thoughts about what he did. We don't really know what he did. Some believe that he went to this place that some term the bosom of Abraham, and he preached grace and allowed people to have the opportunity to accept it or not. I don't know that that's right. I don't know. But we know that he done something at that point. The big thing we know he did is he defeated death. That's ultimately what he did. Now, what happened in between the time of death on cross and resurrection, it's not really clear to us. Doesn't necessarily impact us in any way. But it may have impacted some people that had already passed. We don't know. But Satan was defeated at that point, and Christ obviously came forward. Now, whether he walked out or whether he, like Brother Joe said, he could have just appeared out, because we see him do that, right? I mean, as he appeared to apostles, he didn't walk in the room; he just appeared in the room, and so we know he had the ability to do that. So he may have very well done that same thing, coming out of the grave. Really doesn't change anything, whether he did or didn't, about what we believe in. But what we know is the stone wasn't rolled away so he could walk out. It was rolled away with the idea that it allowed people to see he was no longer there. Now, there are thoughts, because the grave clothes were all laying just as they would have been. So if he would have got up and walked out, he would have had to be meticulous in putting the grave clothes exactly back like they were. I tend to believe that he just went out. And, the grave clothes didn't bind him, nothing bound him. But the grave clothes are just a reminder that he wasn't even bound by that. And so he would have, much like he did with the apostles, he would have appeared, disappeared kind of thing. And then the stone was open just so we could see that he wasn't there. Ultimately, so that these ladies could.
The grave clothes was not a part of him anymore, and never would be.
Right. That's right. Was not a part of who he was. What was question 4 of them? What were the 3 commands given by the angel to the women in verses 5 through 7?
Don't be afraid.
Okay, first one is don't be afraid.
He's not here. Go quickly and tell my disciples.
Okay, so don't be afraid. He's not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come see the place where he lay. So the command was actually come and look. So don't be afraid. Come and see it. It's for your own eyes, basically. And then go quickly and tell the disciples. So those are the 3 things that the angel, and if you read in, I believe it's in Luke, it actually says there was 2 angels we don't get hung up on that. I mean, Matthew was just recording the event. He wasn't necessarily paying particular to how many, but the angel commanded that. So don't be afraid, which we see that often, right? We see Christ even saying that, because our human nature, if someone appears to us that is not supposed to be there, no matter who it is, we're afraid, right? I remember when the boys were young, Matthew loved, because he could always scare Michael. You know, and Michael wasn't anticipating him being around the corner or wherever it was, and Matthew would just kind of stick his head out and you'd hear Michael scream. But we're that same way. Things that we don't expect to be there are actually a surprise or a fright to us. And in this situation, you know, this angel's looking nothing like a human being. Appears much different. And so the women are taken back by that. And so the angel says, don't be afraid. And then begins giving other instructions as we see, you know, come and see the place. The angel knew, God knew that they were going to need to see this with their own eyes in order to believe. Now, so they were, as well as the apostles that witnessed him, physically seeing with eye, other than Paul, they would have been the last people. I don't think there's any other. Some of the last people, I'll say it that way just to cover myself, some of the last people to actually see what had happened in terms of Christ was not there, see him eye to eye in terms of seeing that he resurrected. Now, we have seen him through actions that have taken place, but we've not literally seen him, so to speak, to know that he's alive and well. But we know he's alive and well because we've seen the actions of what he does. We've experienced it in our own life. But physically seeing him appear, none of us have done that. So these women, as well as the apostles, and the 500 that it's recorded saw him, were the last to have seen him physically. And it was important, God knew it would be important for them to see that. Because from that point forward then, faith became not by sight, but faith became by believing in things that are not seen. And that's how our faith is today. We believe in something that we cannot see, although we know it happens, and we can not literally see it, but we can see it in terms of lives changed, our own life changed from that standpoint.
So were the women the first ones there?
Yes.
So what's that tell you about the men? The women had more faith than the men.
I think they were there to prepare the body.
Who, the
Yeah.
women?
Yeah. So
Don't blow my theory.
Well, that was their,
you actually jumped ahead to question 5.
Oh, did I?
You did.
Oh.
Why do you think that Jesus appeared to the women first? I don't think it was they had more faith. I think they may have had more action behind what they were doing. I don't know that it was faith, because their anticipation was, we're fixing to go anoint the body that we didn't get to do because we didn't have time before they put him in the tomb. But they were dedicated. Now, I think the thing for us to learn about this is not men, women, but it is to learn that God rewards our dedication. And we see that. When we are dedicated to serve him, we see God give us great benefit or blessings through that. Whereas if we sit back and wait a while, we may create even some problems for ourselves by not acting upon what God may be leading us to do. And so we find a dedication here, and we see a reward that the women actually got to see him. So there is a if you want to call it reward, there's a blessing in that they were up and headed out there and going and wanted to anoint the body. They were wanting to do a good thing. And because of that, they got to see a good thing. And that was the resurrected body, or resurrected Christ. All right, question 6, before Mary starts going male, female on me again. Were the guards Roman soldiers, and who did they report to, and why would they do this? So the guards, were they Roman soldiers?
Yes.
Yeah, they were. If you remember, the Jews actually went to the Romans and said, hey, we're afraid that some of his apostles are going to come steal his body so that they can say he resurrected. Can you put some guards out there? And so the Romans did.
And didn't they want to kill themselves when they found out the stone had been rolled away?
No, you're thinking of another time when Peter was let out of prison. I believe it was Peter. Peter or Paul, one
I
of the two.
thought the Romans feared for their life
Peter.
because the stone was rolled away and they was afraid that they were going to get in trouble.
They did fear for their life, yes. And that's what, so because they feared for their life, who did they go report this to?
The elders,
Which were Romans or Jews?
Jewish.
They were Jewish. Now, a good Roman soldier, if he's following chain of command, does he go to Jewish people and report, or does he go to his Roman commander and report? Typically, it's Roman commander, right? So why did they go, which goes back to what Mary was talking about. They're afraid. Their responsibility was to guard this tomb, make sure that stone doesn't get rolled away. Well, it's rolled away. And of course, they couldn't stop it. But so they go to the Jewish elders and they say, hey, here's what's happened. You know, we're afraid about, you know, we tell this to our Roman, we could be put to death. Yeah, probably would have, because they failed in what they were supposed to do. So they go and they report to the Jewish people, and so the Jewish leaders, the elders, make up this story. Okay, so tell them that the apostles come and got him, and we're gonna, and they actually give them money, hush money, basically. They give them hush money so that they won't tell anything different than this. And then they say, now I can't imagine as a Roman guy, after hearing what these elders have just done, that you place your life in their hands. But they say, if the governor questions it, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. Well, now they've just paid you hush money to lie. Do you really think that they're going to protect your life when you go, you know, if a governor starts questioning? I mean, I would have a hard time putting my life in their hands, but this may have been the only way they saw out as well.
There's another verse there that'll straighten that out.
What's that?
When he said, we'll tell him you went to sleep.
Yeah.
You were asleep.
Well, that's
Went to sleep, the governor would have had him executed.
right. Their reasoning for going where they went was because they were fearful of their life. And they didn't know what else to do. The Jewish elders then had an opportunity. You remember when Christ walked in, or rode in, triumphal entry, before he gets into the city of Jerusalem, he's on the mountain and he does something and says something. Only does it one other time recorded in the Bible, and that is he wept. And he wept over Jerusalem because they would not see who he truly was. So he rides in, goes through all this, gets to this point in time where the Roman soldiers come and report to the elders, hey, this guy's not there. I mean, the angels have come, because they were there for this. The angels have come, told the women this. We're just telling you what happened. The elders at that point then had an opportunity to actually say, we were wrong. This guy truly is the Son of God. But instead of taking the opportunity, they just go deeper into the lie and into sin, right? We find ourselves sometimes in that same situation where we have the opportunity to actually admit or realize we were wrong, and to make it, not that we can make it not ever happen, but we use this term, make it right. We can actually go in the right direction from that point. Now, we've went wrong before, but we can go right at that point. They had the opportunity to do that, but they don't. They just go deeper into this, which means there has to be another lie. We always tell our kids, like, if you tell one, you're probably going to have to tell another, and it's going to find you out at some point in time. It's the same way here. I mean, the elders are having to go deeper with this, right? And pay hush money to get these soldiers to agree to go along with it. So they had the opportunity, but they didn't take it. And yet we find ourselves at that same point sometimes in our own walk with Christ. So it's hard for us to be like real condemning against these Jewish elders because we find ourselves doing some of the same things over and over. Maybe not to the magnitude of what we think about this being, but still, it's still sin, right? If we don't follow the direction that God gives for us. So question 7, why did the story that they made up not make any sense? So the story they made up is actually in verse 13, which Don referenced a minute ago. Tell the people, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. So why did that story really not make any sense? You said,
Same reason that when Peter was in prison and the jailer woke up and found him gone, and he was gonna kill himself, because if you lose a prisoner, you're gonna take your own life, or they're gonna take your life.
right. It was a death sentence at that point. So basically, when they tell this story, they're saying that we failed to do what we were supposed to do and that ultimately we should be put to death by the Romans. Why else does it not make sense?
Well, one thing, he says, when it comes to the governor's errors, we'll persuade him, you know, telling the governor they was asleep on the job ain't gonna secure them.
Right,
Been better to say they was awake and tell what happened.
right. And we don't really know what story they would have told the governor. You know, we don't really know if that may have happened. We don't know because we don't have the rest of the story of what happened to these 2 Roman soldiers. We kind of wish we did so we'd know what occurred, but we don't have it. But it doesn't make sense that they would go and tell that because that's going to be death for those 2 soldiers.
That's cover-up.
A cover-up, right.
It wasn't really evidence.
So what else about it doesn't make sense? Would it make sense that the disciples would come and steal him by night?
No. Because if they believe what God told them, they would have no reason to come and steal him.
Right.
Because they want to, well, yeah, but they want to prove that he is who he says he is. So they're just gonna let it happen.
Yeah, and stealing him by night and hiding him somewhere, if he was still dead, and they steal the body and hide him somewhere, they've not proved anything. The proof is actually letting it happen as it happened, not that they could change it, but the proof is that he has done what he said now. And if they would have stole the body at night, if that would have been the story, that really didn't make sense because they would be disproving what Jesus actually said he would do. So it doesn't make sense from that standpoint either. So the story they make up is not really help in explaining from their standpoint what had occurred to Jesus. Because if the apostles steal him, then it's just saying that they didn't believe in who he was.
Kevin, would they have been violating the law if they'd have touched a dead body?
Before sunrise, yes. Yep, because that would have been, well, no, it would have been,
They did it at night.
I guess no matter when, I'd have to go back and read that if there's a stipulation on how long, because I was thinking 3 days, but that's not right, I don't think. So probably yes. They probably would have been unclean, and they would have had to, then went to the priest and done the sacrifice in order to be clean again. So yeah, it would have been, probably would have been that. Now, of course, in their life, as they walked with Christ, there was things they done that, you know, Christ touched unclean. So I don't know if that would have played, probably their Jewish background, it would have played into their thought too, probably. So, all right, question 8 then. Who did Jesus make a special appearance to in Luke 24? And why would we think that he did this? So if you want to flip over to Luke. Okay, before that, though.
Wasn't Thomas, was it?
No, that was after. Simon Peter. And it's actually confirmed in 1 Corinthians 15, I think. Simon. It was Simon Peter. Simon Peter. Mhm. Why do we think he would have appeared to Simon Peter? Because I think it's in 1 Corinthians 15. Well, he actually really done more than doubted too, didn't he? He denied. In 1 Corinthians 15, in verse 3, this is where Paul speaks of the resurrected Christ. And he says, "For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures. Then he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas," which was Peter, "then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep." So there was a special appearance to Peter, and we would probably tend to believe, because we're never really told why, but we would tend to believe that it was because Peter had actually denied him. And Christ had told Peter before, if you remember, before he was arrested, that upon you I will build my church. So Peter was going to play a very solid role in the New Testament church. So Christ appears to him, and I would guess that this would be Christ showing grace to Peter, and Peter having the ability then to accept that grace or turn away from it. I wonder, now Judas has already killed himself at this point, but I wonder if Judas would have still been alive if Christ would have done the same thing. Appeared to him, offered him the chance. We don't know. I would like to think that probably would have happened, but I don't know that. But he shows that grace to Peter. And he... Dom is getting... Yeah. I would like to think that same grace would have been shown to Judas if he would have still been alive. Now, Judas took matters in his own hands, went and hung himself, and so then really put an end to the opportunity for grace at that point. That was another place where, Judas goes back to the elders and he throws the money at their feet. And they say, "We don't want the money back." And Judas is in remorse at that point in time for what he done, but he doesn't turn to the right place. He goes back to them, seeking for forgiveness from them. And they can't give that. And so you wonder if Judas would have hung on for a couple more days if he would have been able to do the same thing Peter did and have the forgiveness. Because what Peter did and what Judas did, it's hard to say that it was really that much different. Peter's denying him while he's watching him being beaten. Judas denied him before anything, or betrayed him before anything ever happened. Now, he saw what happened afterwards, which had led him to do what he did. But I would like to think that grace would have been shown to Judas also.
What does it mean here when it says that he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time who were still alive, although some had fallen asleep? Does fallen asleep mean sleeping or died?
Dead, yeah. They use that term throughout New Testament to describe someone that had passed. Where we would say they've passed, they would say they've fallen asleep. Because they understood there was a resurrection that would occur. And so they talked of it in terms of sleeping, and then the resurrection would happen, they'd be back alive. Which is probably would be a better way for us to communicate it as well. Because we know that there is a resurrection that's coming. We know that there's, that death here is not the end. All right, in question 9 then, in verse 18, what does the word authority mean? So verse 18, Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me.
My King James says, all power is given unto me.
Yeah.
Basically, it really means the same thing.
It does. Authority, if you think about in a school system, the superintendent, other than the school board, superintendent really has the authority. It's been delegated to them really by the school board to run the school, day to day run the school. They have the authority for that. So the decisions they make, they have that power, if you want to think of it that way, to actually make those decisions. It's been delegated to them by the school board. They hire them to operate the school day to day. God had given Christ the authority or power to actually oversee all of heaven and all of earth. When we think about that, and we think back through some events in time, and you think back to a moment where Christ sends the apostles out, and he gives them power to do miracles, to heal, to cast out demons. If you remember that missionary journey they went on, and they come back and they're so excited because they've seen all this stuff happen. Which then again, they still fail to see, his resurrection after that. But yet Christ had given them that ability. So Christ has the ability to give that to whoever because God has given it to him. So all authority, all power had been given unto him. And he had the ability then to use that power in whatever way he wanted. So when we look at this statement of all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Christ is saying, I have the authority for this message to be spread however I want it to be spread. And how does he choose? To send humans, right? To send people to go and share the message of what has happened. But he's saying, I have the authority, I could do this however, but I'm sending you. Which is the same message today, right? He has the authority. He could, if he wanted to, he's not going to, but he could write it in the clouds. I'm Jesus Christ, I raised from the dead, believe in me. He doesn't do that. He could appear in our church service at any point in time.
Don't you think he done that because it's on a personal level?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you what I've seen, and you're more apt to believe it than seeing written in the clouds.
Yeah.
You can have your own perspective. You can explain it in a way that you can understand it because you're equal.
It's also a privilege. He is providing this opportunity for us to be a part of it. It's not always viewed that way. Sometimes it's viewed as like a job, and not a job that you like, but a job that you just have to do. That's not the way Christianity should be. It's not the way discipleship should be. It's not the way that this statement is meant to be. It's not a job necessarily that we hate to go and do. It's a privilege that we have. And Christ had every other avenue available to him for the message to be shared. And yet, this power that he has, he's chosen for these people, as well as us, to be the ones to take it to the rest of the world.
He started out with giving it to the 12. I always thought about they went to school for 3 years. And some of them finally graduated, but some of them kind of flunked out too.
One of them failed tremendously.
Yeah.
But going back to what Don brought up earlier, the rich man and Lazarus, not Lazarus that was raised from the dead, but the other Lazarus. And Lazarus just says, will you send someone back to talk to my brothers? Because if you send someone, they will believe. Well, Christ was there walking on the face of the earth. Were people believing in that? Some did, but then they also denied him. So Christ says, they've got Moses and the prophets. They've got what they need in order to believe. So now Christ is saying, look, I could do this however, but here's the way that people are going to believe. And like Natalie said, When we get on a personal level with people and we start talking to them about what's happened in our life, we start talking about the truth, and we walk them through like what Jesus does for us, the forgiveness that we find, who we were before that forgiveness and who we are after, people will believe. They may not do it right in that moment, but they will. We've seen that happen too many times, haven't we? So then, question 10, what do we understand from the word go in verse 19? And I think King James, the beginning of verse 19, it has the word go in it too, doesn't it? Go therefore. If we looked at what that would actually mean in our language today, instead of it being a command of go, it would be like leaving this place, go to that one to do it. The actual meaning of that is as you go. So it's not like I have to leave here and I have to go there in order to do it. It's as I go from here to there or wherever, I do this, implying your daily life. Like as you go about your daily life, then you are to make disciples of all nations. I think sometimes we get in our minds like to go and make a disciple has to be like going from point A to point B, and when we get to point B, then we'll do mission stuff. But you know as well as I do, when we get up in the morning and we go, let's say our end result is to go to the doctor's office in Jonesboro. When we get up and let's say that we have to stop and get gas. So we stop and get gas. While we're filling up our car, there's probably someone on the other side of the pump, and you can strike up a conversation with them, or you can get back in your vehicle and not say a word. If God leads, we'd probably better strike up the conversation because there's probably something that's going to happen out of that. Let's say you had to stop in Walmart before you get to the doctor's office. You have tons of opportunities that we've talked about before, that as you go through Walmart, there's people that probably need to hear an encouraging word. There may be someone that has a question about stuff. There's just all those opportunities. So as you go, we make disciples. Ultimately, we get to the doctor's office in Jonesboro, and even there, maybe we talk about our faith in some way. But we had all these opportunities on the way to there to do it as well. And sometimes we get focused on, well, when I get to the doctor, I will do this. I will talk about my faith. And yet Christ is saying, as you go throughout your whole day, this is what should be going with you. And yet we get kind of stuck in our mindset of, well, I'll do it there. Same way that we kind of do with missionaries sometimes. Well, we're going to send them to go do this. At the same time, we're called every day to be talking about our faith. So, and then the last question there, I don't really have a number on it, but at the end, and I just wanted you, I'd like for you to actually, I'm going to read you a statement here, but I'd like for you to take a moment, whether it be today or when you think about it, maybe tomorrow, whatever, and just kind of write down what you think it is to be a disciple. I'm going to read you a statement. This is out of Warren Wiersbe, a commentary that he wrote that I think is a good statement, but I'd like for you to put it in your own words when you have time to think about it. So he says, a disciple then is one who has believed on Jesus Christ and expressed his faith by being baptized. So admitted he was a sinner, acknowledged Jesus Christ as the only way for salvation, and confessed sin. Then has followed up with being baptized. So that's kind of the cornerstone of being a disciple, is what he's saying. He then remains in the fellowship of the believers, like you're doing today, right? We associate among believers. He goes on to say that he might be taught the truths of the faith. So in other words, there's this desire to continue to learn, right? Because when we first get saved, we don't have all the answers, and no matter what point in time we look at, we still don't have all the answers. So there's this desire to learn. We surround ourselves with believers in order to do that. He is then able to go out and win others and teach them. And he says this was the pattern of the New Testament church. I think it's a pretty good description of it. What I'd like for you to do is think about it in your own life, like what that means. Because you guys are at different stages even. Most of you are retired or around that age anyway. And so personally, what does this look like in your own life? you do come, on Wednesday mornings or Wednesday nights, whatever. You do associate with believers as much as you can. You go to churches, but then, what else does it mean? How is it that we are continuing to learn the truths of faith? Part of it is by coming here, but how else are we doing that? And then, how is it that we then go and teach others? Because sometimes we get in our mind that I'm going to say it this way, I don't want you to take offense to this, but that our usefulness is over sometimes. We have that mindset. Like, I can't teach a class anymore, I don't have the energy to do that, or I don't have the ability to do whatever. But yet, if God still has us here on the earth, our usefulness is not over. It's just changed. Like, we go into a different role. The same way that when you retired from your job, whatever job you had, you went into a different role, right? You become, maybe you started caring for grandkids, or you're more involved in their life or something, and you had different opportunities. And we can't say, even when we think about church setting, because we involve ourselves with like believers, we can't say that our usefulness in that church is over. It's not. Absolutely not. And never will be until the day God calls us home. It's just it changes somewhat. So sometimes we fail to see what it's changed into. And I think kind of thinking through that, because obviously God doesn't say, or Christ doesn't say in this last statement here, verses 18 through 20, He doesn't say that up until the age of 65, I want you to go and to make disciples. He says, as you go, which also implies that there's no age limit on this. Like, it's as you go throughout whatever phase of life that you're in, whatever walk of life you're in, whatever job you're in, whatever retirement phase you're in, as you go throughout that, this is what you are to do. And through that, people are going to see Christ. But if we're not intentional with that, then people are not going to see Christ, because we can get so focused on, okay, my place to talk about my faith is going to be in the doctor's office. And yet we go to all these other places throughout the day and we miss all those opportunities because we were thinking the doctor's office is the place. Does that make sense? So I'd like for you to think about it in your own life. What does the disciple look like for me? And whether you use that, his description to think through it, or whether you maybe have your own. And obviously looking back at these two passages of text is an important place to look as well. So let me pray for us, and then we'll do our prayer requests, praise items. Dear Heavenly Father, we do thank you for this time you've given us here to look to your word and, Lord, to see the instructions that